Good morning, everybody. This is the Personal Playlist Podcast, fondly referred to as the P3 on Voice Ed Radio. I'm Noah Daniel.
Music is a world within itself, with a language we all understand.
I am so excited to have Lois Letchford here on the Personal Playlist Podcast. Lois specializes in teaching children who have struggled to learn to read through numerous commercial programs. She worked with students of all ages in Australia, England, and Texas. Her creative teaching methods vary depending on the reading ability of the student, employing age-appropriate rather than reading age-appropriate material. Her non-traditional background, multi-continental exposure, and passion for helping failing students have equipped her with a unique skill set and perspective. Originally a physical education teacher, she later completed a master's in literacy and reading from the State University of New York at Albany. Lois has presented her work at the California Reading Association, Michigan Summer Institute, and New York State Reading Association conferences. She's co-president of the Albany City Reading Association and a member of the Australian College of Education. Welcome to the show, Lois.
Good afternoon, Noah. It's wonderful to be here. Let's see if this works.
I think it's going to work. I always believe in the possibility of things. And speaking of the possibility, as a person who is a professional with all of these skill sets, how did you persevere through your own family challenge, your own son's challenge, and then write a memoir about it?
Well, that's a really good question, because when my son struggled right back in 1994, I couldn't see anything other than a child who struggled. And as his life progressed and our life progressed, I saw a gap between what was being taught and how the child was learning. And that became significant. And that's what really pushed me to become a reading specialist.
Isn't it amazing how our roles as parents and our roles as teachers become so tied together sometimes?
Yes, that's exactly what it was. I mean, I couldn't believe what happened. And that was my driver. And when I was teaching Nicholas in 1995, learning became so much fun. Learning and teaching became so much fun for this child who they said can't do anything. So that's my mindset.
That is pretty special, though, because a lot of people are challenged to work with their own children, and they can have incredible credentials, and yet when it comes to your own child, feel a deficit. So what is it that worked, and why did all of that help you to write your memoir, Reversed?
Well, Nicholas is a very special child. Nicholas is my second son. I have three sons, and Nicholas is a special one, the second one. And he is even now quite amazing. One, because of the extreme deficits he has, but secondly, because he's actually so conforming, which sounds crazy. And he desperately wanted to be like everybody else in the class. And then you realise he's got a brain that's like my husband's, which sounds an odd thing to say. But my husband is, my description for my husband is meticulously organised and over-conscientious. And Nicholas would be the same, but he had this language deficit that really stopped him from succeeding as a normal child. So he was really my instigator, and every year in school he just got better and better and better until 2007 he graduated in the top 20% of the class and won the Yes I Can Award for Exceptional Children, put out by the Council for Exceptional Children. And that's a national award that he won for academics. And I think, yes, he did that. And then he got 2 undergraduate degrees, 2 honours degrees, and then this year he was awarded his PhD in applied mathematics from Oxford University.
That's incredible. I mean, that is incredible.
Yeah.
You read about all of the people that you've worked with and that they go on to college, but when it's your child and you watch them become all that's possible because of the work that you do and because of what you saw, that must just really affirm every extra piece of studying that you did and every extra course. I can't imagine how this doesn't inform every presentation that you give.
It does. You're absolutely right. It does, and everything. I cannot imagine what could have happened to Nicholas if he had not learned to read at the age of 7. because he had this incredible brain and no one could see it. And if he hadn't learned to read, I think he would have committed suicide by now.
You know, we really do underplay the prevalence of reading in society. And actually, Richard Branson's been making these incredible videos called Made by Dyslexia.
Yeah.
And he talks about that challenge. And we see all these famous people talking about that challenge and really looking at the gifts that they had and how they couldn't be nurtured in a traditional classroom. And I appreciate so much that you help students become exposed to a wider range of texts and then develop their skills and return them to these conventional classrooms. And yet they can be more prepared and better learners ready to re-enter that experience with confidence.
And that's always my aim, is to have them re-enter the regular classroom.
When did you start writing Reversed?
Well, that was another family move. My husband moved to upstate New York. And I go around and ask what I can do to do teaching here. And they say, you can't teach here. Your qualifications don't match up with us. So I say, that's fine. I went back to UAlbany, which got me into the education field, and I finished that. And I thought, what do I do now? I'd really like to tell my story. And at that time, Nicholas had been accepted. He was in his PhD program at Oxford. And I just started to write it. That's what I did. And then I went to a writer's class and met this young lady who said, I'll help you. And she made my book brilliant. In fact, I have 3 editors, and I've got to say this, I have 3 editors for my work. My young editor worked at the diamond mine with me, getting the stuff out of the ground. My second editor was from Acorn Publishing, and she took my work, and within 24 hours, she got back to me and edited it. And I said, oh, wow. And she was like the diamond cutter. And then I had a third editor who went over it and she polished it.
How amazing is that? And to say, are you able to use that story as a metaphor for getting people what they need in the world?
Yes, most people love it. It's just getting the story out there. It takes such work. That's what I'm finding. The sales pitch and all of that is just hard work. And it can be hard work getting your story out through the P3 too.
So the idea of this show is that people take a nostalgic song, a song that reflects their identity, and a song that picks them up, lifts them up, inspires or motivates them, and they tell their story through these 3 songs. So tell me a little bit about preparing for the show.
It's been fascinating, and I'm really pleased I've had the length of time I had to think about my 3 songs, because it's taken a while. So it's just like writing to me. I come up with something and then I have to adjust it and change a little bit, and then the final thing, it just slips in. Yes.
So you sent me a nostalgic song that's actually the radio adaptation of a show that was a serial in Australia.
It was, and it became really important. I can tell you why. I grew up in southeast Queensland, and my parents were farmers, dairy farmers. So they are out in the morning and the evening milking cows every single day. My mother grew up with very little reading. My father was a reader, but not my mother. And we had very few books in our house. And the whole world came to us via radio. And it was the country hour that would come on from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And at 1 o'clock every day, 5 days a week, we would all listen to Blue Hills. And this was on ABC radio. And the other show that we would listen to, my younger sister and I, was the Children's Hour. And the Children's Hour was the only time I was having books in my world. I didn't get it at school, and I didn't get it reading at home. So the radio was absolutely our eye into the world, which is why I chose the story Blue Hills and the music from Blue Hills. And when I listened to it, I thought, it takes me right back to the heat and the place in our home in southeast Queensland.
Isn't that amazing? Okay, let's play Blue Hills. Serials was actually broadcast by the Australian Broadcasting Company for 27 years.
That's right.
It ran for a total of 5,795 episodes and was at the time one of the world's longest running radio serials, which is pretty amazing considering each episode lasted only 15 minutes. And yet those 15 minutes must come back to you so vividly when you hear that music.
Yes, they do. They do. And it was, it took me a long time to realise how much I relied, or our family relied, on ABC Radio for everything. It was our entertainment, it was our news broadcasting, and for me, it was the books. I can still remember listening to A Muddle-Headed Wombat, and one of the books was A Taste for Blue Ribbon and Be Careful What You Wish For.
Today we have podcasts, and we see that resurgence of the power of listening and the power of what we can say and hear in that concentrated time.
We have almost too much choice today. Today we have too much choice. We get overwhelmed with choice.
So this song actually was mentioned by Leanne Hansen, who was on the show last week, and Slim Dusty, who is one of the singers of this song, but was probably made most famous by John Williamson, who is the artist that you brought me this song, that sings this song. But people have called this the unofficial anthem of Australia. And it's interesting, when I was looking into this song, I never really thought that the terms meant something, but I should have known with the vernacular of Australians and the tendency to make words. It's like an amazing thing to learn about, that Waltzing Matilda was not actually literal. Tell us a little bit about what you know about that song.
Oh, Waltzing Matilda, that it was a sheep farmer, or it may be a convict even, who was stealing sheep and then being chased by the police. And they all die the convict dies in the end. As a matter of fact, my husband has convict heritage in his family, so it becomes even more important.
So for people that don't know, Australia was first settled. Maybe tell them that story so they understand your reference to convicts.
Australia was first put on the map in 1770 by Captain Cook. And I say by 1788, Australia was settled by the English. And the English had a problem in that they had convicted so many people, they were putting them on hulks in the river. And they decided, and one of the explorers on Captain Cook's ship was Joseph Banks, and it was Joseph Banks who said, there's an empty place there, let's send our convicts there. And the English government sent their convicts to settle Australia. So we got
of course, Australia had people living there already.
It did have people living there, and there weren't that many of them, which was part of the problem. I think that, it looked like an empty country. Yeah, and you wouldn't have known how many Aboriginals were there at the time, because it's a huge country. And they spread out.
And written by Banjo Patterson, who wrote the words in 1895. There are things that are traditionally Australia. So let's listen to this classic, Waltzing Matilda.
There once was a jolly swag camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree. And he sang as he watched and waited till his belly boiled. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Down came a jumbuck to drink at the billabong. Up got the swaggy and grabbed him with glee. And he sang as he stowed that jumbuck in his tucker bag. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he stowed that jumbuck in his tucker bag. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Down came the squatter.
Australian slang is so interesting because waltzing actually means traveling on foot. And when I used to dance in my gym class to this song, I was thinking, well, this is an interesting kind of waltz, but it must be an Australian slang thing that they waltzed differently. It never occurred to me that it actually meant traveling on foot. But again, you got to love that. And it's even interesting that the Australian women's national soccer team is nicknamed the Matildas because of this song.
Yes. Yeah. Australians are very good at changing and spinning the language around. I think it comes from our heritage.
What do you mean when you say that? I'd love to know more.
Well, the convicts were there. They were there. Let me think about this. The convicts, although they looked like the dregs of society, in fact, the laws in England were so strict and the poverty was so extreme, we say that the convicts were actually the clever people who found their way around the laws. And because of that, then you have the police and the convicts looking after each other, and they had to support each other. But the convicts would always thumb their noses at the police, if that makes any sense to you, because we're equal in a way. So although the police were in power and the guards and whoever else they were in power, the convicts didn't really respect them. And I think that's what comes through a lot in Australian society.
Interesting. And speaking of convicts, actually, the movie that this song comes from a former convict who ends up becoming the unifier of South Africa. So tell me why this movie and this song came to you as an inspirational and motivational one.
And that's Invictus. Do you know the story of Invictus?
Yes, and I know the poem quite well as well. I quite love it. But seeing that poem come to light in that context actually changed the meaning for me. And when Mandela passed away, I analyzed that poem in my class, and it gave new meaning. Really, I never looked at them together. I'd only looked at them in the film, and it's very powerful. And the whole idea of being the master of your fate and the captain of your soul, I mean, that's the human right. Yes. And I think that that's something that I try to do in the classroom, and reading your work. I think that's really what you're trying to do for students, is give them the opportunity and the tools to be the masters of their fate.
Exactly. And, Nelson Mandela was in a position where South Africa could have gone into civil war very quickly. And everyone within his field, no matter what colour you were, you all have your own prejudices, and everyone had to check their prejudices to make South Africa work with Mandela. And I think that's what we have to do in the classroom too, is just to look at things slightly differently, step back and look slightly differently, and not just write children off, so that we can teach them more effectively. Mandela to me is absolutely amazing, and that says in that movie, he was in prison for 27 years. How can you be in prison for 27 years and come out and forgive those who put you in there? I mean, that's a phenomenal statement.
I think it is, and that the idea of forgiveness being central to the work that he was trying to do to unify a country who hadn't forgiven him for his basic humanity and who he was. So, that
yes.
scene where the Springboks have to sing the anthem and it's required, and that everybody has to come together. I mean, the whole idea of a national anthem can be really divisive, and you don't think about it that
yes.
way. And you think about when South Africa was going through this renaissance in some way of what South Africa was going to look like as a unified country, this anthem really does give you hope, and it really does.
Yes.
It shows you what's possible with great leadership.
That's exactly, and I think that's what the world is lacking right at this moment in time. Someone who has this vision, and someone who can say we cannot ostracize a group and build up hate. We have to come to it from another direction.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that is the only change that you can have, is perspective. But there's so much power in that. So let's listen to the song, thinking about it as your inspirational song, and helping us understand that the choir singing it is representative of that unity and that coming together of a nation.
Go, Sisi, Gale.
the dismantling of apartheid is so significant, but understanding it next to sport and the power of sport to bring you together. It's an amazing film, and Morgan Freeman and Matt Damon are incredible. But when you hear it and it becomes your pick-me-up song, what comes to your mind?
Lots of tears. That Mandela was able to do it, and the way he did it to get the South African football national team to go into every school and have the kids on side and to get the whole country on side was a feat that was phenomenal.
Yes, and that's where sport can be that great unifier. I mean, you look at different countries in the world who have so little, and yet people rally around their sports teams, or people who have so much, but they're so divided, but they rally around their sports teams. And there is so much to say about leadership in sport as much as there is to say about leadership in a country. And it's those leaders who walk the walk they talk, and those leaders who do the hard work of, pulling up their sleeves and getting involved. Both of those leaders in that film really exemplify that.
And we can divide or we can unify. And in this country at the moment, that it's aiming to be a divisive country, and that's very scary. It frightens me what we're doing today. You might want to put that in, but
well, no, I think I think it's fair that division pulls apart by definition, and unity brings people together. And just going back to that important point about checking your biases in a classroom, we all have to check our biases, and in order to create, an inclusive society, and hopefully a democratic one still, we need to check all of our biases, and we need to be open about them.
And this will bring us back to the beginning, to my story, because with Nicholas as a 5 and a 6-year-old, looked like he had nothing. And his teacher said, this child is so far behind, he will never catch up. He's not going to learn in my room. And her prophecies were self-fulfilling. She didn't see anything other than a child who was slow. And that is the scary part, to see that kid now has a PhD. So you're right. We want to check our biases.
Well, that's not the scary part. That's the wonderful part. But the scary part is, and John Hattie actually did all this research about it to say that it's actually teacher expectation of learners and not learner ability that is the greatest indicator of a student's success. So you turning your son's life around was really a slap in the face to that teacher for her limiting beliefs about your son. And I hope that she learned that you can't say that a child can't, and be definitive about that, because there is possibility where we often see none, and it's how you address the child and it's how you believe that can make the difference. So Lois, you wrote the book, Reversed, a Memoir. How can people find you?
It's available on all bookshops, so you can get it there. And my website is loisletchford.com. So please feel free to send me an email, send me your stories, talk to me. I do things that are slightly differently and people don't see the value of them, but I'm always there making active readers. And that's the key, that our students are becoming actively involved in their learning and loving learning to read.
And that is something we need more of in this world. Lois, thank you so much for coming to the Personal Playlist podcast. Do you want to add anything else before I play you out?
Thank you very much, Noel. It's great to be on your show.
I hope you have a fantastic day.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the P3, the Personal Playlist podcast. I'm Noah Daniel. This is Voice Ed Radio, and I hope you have a fantastic day.